How do we show that we love God?
It's a new way, a new salvation for God's chosen people.
First and foremost, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh. Name him his only begotten Son, who the world calls Jesus Christ, Yahweh Shah, right? And how do we love God? How do you show that you love God? Get right into it. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3 says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous," right? So how we show that we love the Most High God is by keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. And it says, "And now Israel, what doth the Lord thy God require of thee, but to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul," right? To keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command thee this day for thy good. So how do we love God? How do we fear God? Is by keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments. How do we walk in all his ways? Keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Very simple and plain. Right now, let's get the first two commandments. This is the book of Matthew, chapter 22, and verse 36. It says, "Master, which is the great commandment in the law?" Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment." So how do we love God? We've already shown it, right? 1 John 5 and 3 and Deuteronomy 10 and 12 and 13. We love the Most High God by keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments with all our heart and with all our soul, with all our mind, right? Let's get Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8, right? With all our mind. So 1 John 1 and 8, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." So we're going to have good success and we're going to prosper when we meditate on the law, statutes, and commandments, right? Back to Matthew 22. Let's get the second commandment, right? Matthew 22, verse 39. "And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So the next commandment, the second greatest commandment, is to love your neighbor as yourself, right? So how do you love your neighbor? Well, let's get it. 1 John chapter 5, verse 2, right? "By this we know that we love the children of God," your neighbor, right? When we love God and keep his commandments. So you love your neighbor if you love God and you keep his commandments, right? Very simple and plain. Let's get Leviticus 19 and verse 17, because this goes into loving your neighbor, right? Leviticus 19, verse 17. It says, "Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord," right? So how do you love your neighbor? Is by rebuking your neighbor, correcting your neighbor, right? Also, not bearing a grudge on your neighbor, forgiving them, right? Loving them by keeping the commandments and correcting them, telling them if they're not keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Because let's get Proverbs 27, verse 5. Book of Proverbs, chapter 27, verse 5. "Open rebuke is better than secret love." So open rebuke, open correction is better than secret love, right? This is how we love our neighbor. But it's also how we love our neighbor. 1 John 5 and 2 says, love God and keep his commandments, right? So if I love my neighbor, I'm not going to steal from him. I'm not going to lie to him. I'm not going to covet his possessions, right? I'm not going to sleep with his wife, right? Not commit adultery. I'm not going to murder him, right? I'm not going to do anything that's contrary to the law, statutes, and commandments because I love my neighbor and I love the Most High God, right? This is how we show that we love God, right? Very simple and plain. Let's get John 15, verse 10. John 15 and 10, it says, "And if ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love," right? So Christ abide in the Father's commandments, right? So Christ abide in his Father's love by keeping the Father's commandments, right? So we have to abide in the love of Christ by keeping what? His commandments. And what is Christ's commandments? Well, his commandments is to keep the laws of God, right? Let's get some of those, right? Let's get first, how do we substantiate that? John 7 and 16, right? It says, "Jesus answered them and said, My doctrine is not mine own, but his that sent me," right? So the doctrine of Christ is the doctrine of the Most High God, of the Father, right? Which sent Christ. So the Father's doctrine isn't going to change, right? So his doctrine is the law, statutes, commandments, the Mosaic law. So let's get one of Christ's commandments, Matthew 23, from the top, right? Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you, observe and do, right? So the scribes and Pharisees that sit in Moses' seat is going to be telling you to keep the law, statutes, commandments. They're going to tell you to be keeping the Mosaic law. So Christ said, observe and do what they tell you, right? But the end of verse, "But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not," right? So don't do what they do. Do what they say. And what they say is to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, right? Another thing, Matthew chapter 4 and verse 4, it says, "But he answered and said, It is written, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God." The Mosaic law, the laws of God, proceeded out of the mouth of God. So Christ says we're supposed to be living on that, right? By every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. So we have to love the Most High God by keeping his laws, statutes, and commandments, right? Everything that proceeded out of the Most High God mouth, that's what we're supposed to be keeping, right? So thou shalt not eat unclean animals, thus saith the Lord, right? You should keep the Sabbath, thus saith the Lord, right? You should keep the Passover, thus saith the Lord, right? All the things that, people celebrate these days, the Most High God did not tell them to celebrate it, right? They're not celebrating all the things that God told you in the Bible to actually keep, right? Thus saith the Lord, right? All the things like Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, right? Feast of First Fruits, all these holy days that it's speaking of in the Bible that we're supposed to be keeping, the new moon, right? The Sabbath, right? All these things that we're supposed to be keeping, we're not keeping, right? So we need to come back to loving the Most High God the way we're supposed to be doing it. And that's by keeping everything that he told us to do, right? All the law, statutes, commandments in the Mosaic law, right? And I'm going to end it on this. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13, right? And it says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." So our whole duty, what we're required to do, is to keep the law, statutes, commandments. Fear God and keep his law, statutes, and commandments. This is our whole duty, and this is how we show that we love the Most High God, right? So with that, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God, Yahweh, name is only begotten Son, who wrote God, Jesus Christ, Yahweh, Shalom.
It's a new way, a new salvation.